mercantile ethos supersedes all other influences. It is a land whose destiny has been shaped by trade and commerce. For a state that's seen an average growth rate of 11% over the past 2 decades, Gujarat clearly knows how to do business. And now, with the Chief Minister whose mantra is red carpet and not red tape, the state is seeing investment like never before. Hello and welcome to the Ministers of Change. I'm Shireen Bhan. This week we trace the journey of the Nano from Singur to Sanand in Gujarat.
What made us decide to come to Gujarat was his promise.
Because the policy-driven state, we move much faster.
We bring you both sides of the debate on speedy clearances and fast-track decisions.
What would you need to do in order to get clearances for a mega project? You would have to reduce all your procedures to nil.
The problem is in India, if anything is cleared in less than 3 years, you think some hanky-panky has happened.
We travel to the Adani port in SEZ and see how Gujarat's port infrastructure is providing an impetus to its economy.
Around those ports, focus clusters have been built, whether they are petrochem clusters or whether they are engineering clusters like in Hazira.
And Gujarat has an additional advantage because it has a huge northwest hinterland closest to the seashore in Gujarat.
We talk to entrepreneurs, both big and small, to get a first-hand report of what it means to do business in Modi's Gujarat.
Gujarat must dream big.
And we examine the predicament of land, labor and livelihood in vibrant Gujarat.
We have a job-killing growth in Gujarat.
This battle was perhaps the final nail in the coffin for former West Bengal Chief Minister Buddhadev Bhattacharjee. Violence in Nandigram and Singur cost the left's most industry-friendly leader dearly and made Mamata Banerjee the saviour of marginalised farmers in the state. The ferment that one saw in August 2008 was not a call against corporate-led development, as it is popularly perceived, but a call against the acquisition of fertile, well-irrigated, multi-crop farmland and the destruction of an economically viable livelihood. With Singur simmering, Ratan Tata was forced to look elsewhere, lest his dream of developing a people's car was derailed.
We have taken the very regretful decision to move the Nano project out of West Bengal.
On October the 3rd, when Tata Motors announced that they would be moving out of Singur, Ratan Tata received letters of invitation from 4 states and an SMS from Narendra Modi, which simply said, "Welcome to Gujarat."
What made us decide to come to Gujarat was his promise that he would confirm the allotment of land and other facilities in a few days. Now, a few days is a difficult thing to swallow in India because it often doesn't happen. In this case, a few days became 3 days.
Located 60 kilometers from Gujarat's financial and business capital, Ahmedabad, an 1100-acre plot in Sanand was passed on by the state government to Tata Motors. This piece of land, where the Tata Motors manufacturing unit came up in a record 14 months, belonged to the Anand Agricultural University for over a century. In 3 days, the government acquired the land and passed it along. No questions were asked, no protests raised. The two things that skyrocketed were real estate prices in Sanand and Narendra Modi's brand value as a chief minister who delivers.
We found Gujarat one of the most amenable states to private sector investment. They are clearly much more focused on making the investment climate in Gujarat business friendly, more than in other states. And I think there is less factionalism within the government. So I think in some of the governments where there is a coalition, there gets to be delay as a result of that. I think in Gujarat it's a one-party government. That helps them. They do take quicker decisions than in most other states, and they are really welcoming of investment.
But the questions that beg to be asked are, what is the cost of making business feel so welcome? And what is the cost of making the state hassle-free for businessmen?
What would you need to do in order to get clearances in 3 days for a mega project? You would have to reduce all your procedures to nil. Basically, you would have to say, when I click, everything should happen. Of course, it would happen for Tata Motors. Next time you click for something else, again it will happen. Which is to say, there are no checks and balances left in the system. This is what makes Gujarat a semi-democratic place.
If all the necessary sanctions have been received, why shouldn't something be cleared in 3 days? The problem is in India, if anything is cleared in less than 3 years, you think some hanky-panky has happened, which I think is very unfortunate. It speaks of a mindset that goes back to the days of the license permit Raj. We must get out of the mindset.
Because the policy-driven state, we move much faster. We don't give any special incentives to anyone. We don't have any special cases. We have only one policy, and that policy is for everyone. And that is the reason the message has gone very loud and clear to the bureaucrats that you have to be fast.
No more that you keep going around again and again and pushing papers, pushing tables to get your files cleared. No, that sort of still happens, but at least in a time-defined way, where within a stipulated period of time we are sure whether we can move ahead with this project, or do we need to take a back seat, or altogether redefine what we are thinking.
Gulmohar Greens was the first golf course to come up in Ahmedabad city in 2005. From a family of real estate developers, this was Alpesh's first independent project, and he was pleasantly surprised that he didn't have to make rounds of government offices to get clearances and licenses.
Phase by phase, we kept on getting clearances, and there were no shortcuts. Like any other state, there are no shortcuts. Whatever needs to be submitted needs to be submitted. Whatever NOCs have to be obtained. So there are no shortcuts of getting permissions, but yes, a better streamlined way.
For a state often criticized for being a latecomer to the country's IT revolution, today almost everything can be done and checked online. From filing an application to do business, to identifying a location based on infrastructure available at a taluka level, to tracking the status of an MOU at various levels of approvals and implementation. And the government has tried to make land acquisition in the state as hassle-free as possible. It has one nodal agency, the Gujarat Industrial Development Corporation, or GIDC, that acquires land for industry.
Even before industry moves in, they have a vision of which parts of the state to actually acquire large tracts of land for industrialization. So it is not an ex-post reaction. Most state governments start reacting after they have got a request from industry. Whereas in Gujarat, they have a vision of acquiring before the requests come in, so that by the time the requests come in, they have already moved various processes to make land available. So I also think the speed with which and the fairness with which they compensate the people who lose their land goes a large way to build positivism in the land acquisition process.
The state's new land acquisition policy goes a step further by declaring that all new purchases by GIDC will be done at prevailing market prices only with the consent of the farmer. To further incentivize the sale, farmers will be paid 10% of the differential between the market price and the allotment price to industry once infrastructure has been built. For those set to lose all their land, the policy provides for additional compensation, allotment of a commercial plot, and even 2 years at a local ITI to provide the necessary training for a skilled job.
While the land acquisition policy looks robust on paper, the state has seen opposition not over the loss of land, but over the loss of livelihood. For instance, GIDC, which began acquiring land in Sanand near the Tata Nano plant for its auxiliary units, saw initial opposition from farmers. GIDC then offered to pay even higher rates than the prevailing market price. But the predicament of the farmers in Sanand is the same as the predicament of farmers in Shingur. They don't want a regenerative asset like land to be replaced by a perishable one, like money.
In March this year, thousands of farmers joined a 350-kilometer-long Padyatra from Mahua village in Bhavnagar district to Gandhinagar to protest against a cement plant. Nirma and the government had signed an MOU during Vibrant Gujarat 2003, and the government gave away what land records showed as fallow land. But in the past decade, a government scheme to build check dams had converted Mahua into a farmer's paradise. So farmers have courted arrest. Nirma has called the High Court order unjust, passing the buck to the government, which is silent. And the protest is not just about land and livelihood, but also about environmental damage a plant like this will cause once mining begins in this limestone-rich region.
There is a scarcity of water. Here we have a water, but you can't drink. And you have a red, green water. And nowadays you will find that Mr. Modi is inaugurating a plant of RO system in various villages, giving money to Taluka Panchayat because water is contaminated, and he considers a great thing.
Ankleshwar is the hub of the chemical and pharma industry in Gujarat. For decades now, this industrial city along with Vapi has topped the most polluted cities chart. So when the final effluent treatment plant was conceived in 2000, it was a welcome first step. But a step that has turned out to be only a token one.
Here there are plants who are born with from the very first they are not able to fulfill any norms, any norms, and still this treatment facility is dumping effluent into the sea. You cannot allow, you have to stop that effluent. If you stop that effluent, all industry had closed down. But that step Narendra Modi is not ready to take, and he is not answering this major question when he talks about industry.
This seems to be the inconvenient truth. Ironic for a state whose chief minister has authored a book on climate change called Convenient Action. Time for us to take a break on the Ministers of Change, but when we return, we travel to the Mundra port in SEZ and see how the port infrastructure in the state is providing impetus to its economy.